Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This week I am painting my version of Melonkat's Draw This In Your Style. I came across Melonkat's work on the new Artful app while it was still in beta and loved her playful drawing style mixed with sombre and moody subjects, I'd say. It's right up my street, so please do check her work out on Instagram and send us some love. But before I get into it, I want to say a huge thank you to my patrons. You guys make this content possible. If anyone wants to check out the monthly rewards that I offer on Patreon, head to patreon.com/finelinerNerd to join the gang and pledge your support. You know when you see somebody's work and it kind of instantly inspires you, creates an image in your head, and you just really want to draw it? That's when you know you found a really good draw this in your style. I just had this sort of flash of how I would do it my own way, and I had to grab my pencil and start drawing, and this is what happened. So I know I changed the pose a fair amount. He's peeking through his fingers and he's not wearing any clothes, which is very typical of me. But yeah, I had a lot of fun working this one out. I actually ended up taking a photo of myself because for some reason I found it really difficult to place the hands on the face, and so I needed a reference image. So I set my camera up and had a mini photo shoot at home, which is really, really embarrassing. When I say that, it was very casual. It was like, just stand there, take a picture, like, let's get this going. And anyway, I got one that was right, that I thought worked, and I was able to translate into my response to this art challenge. If you watch my latest video, you'll know that I'm playing with directional lighting at the moment, and with my last painting, that was definitely the case. It was light hitting the body in the face and how I create shadows and contrast in that way. And with this one, I was focusing less on the light and focusing on shadows. I know that kind of sounds like the same thing, but it's not. In the last one, I was playing with leaving unpainted areas to build up a sense of this flashing lightning on the subject's face. With this one, I'm focusing on where the shadows go rather than where the light is going. So there's a subtle difference, but it's just a different way of looking at building the painting, essentially. And I've talked about this before in other videos, but these light layers and light washes start to build a map of where I'm going to intensify things later, and allow me to just slowly build up those values in a way that makes sense, that I can consider, and that I don't sort of have to rush either. I often dilute my layers quite a lot with fresh water, because I use a technique called dragging. And dragging is where you put down paint, for those of you that don't know, where you put down paint and then touch the edge of that paint with fresh water, and it pulls the pigment away from where you put it, just in a really smooth gradient. And I use this technique a lot in my work to create a smooth texture on the skin, or anything really. It's what I'm doing around the top of the shoulder, what I've done in between the fingers on the face. It's what I've done on his elbows as well. And when it comes to extremities like elbows, shoulders, noses, tops of ears and things, I'll add a little bit more alizarin crimson to this skin tone mixture in particular, and it just adds a tiny little bit of blush, just a little bit of variation in the hue across his body, and just makes looking at him a lot more interesting. I jumped around this painting quite a lot because I didn't want to sit back and wait for too long. I was really excited to paint him, so jumping around allowed me to work on other areas of the painting while other areas dried. So I filled in the butterfly shape with some Windsor yellow, and then I charged in with some Windsor red as well, which is a pyrrole red, and this creates a really subtle orange gradient that is just so characteristic of an admiral butterfly's wings. Later on, I'll fill in the black details on the wing, and it becomes a little bit scary, to be honest. It's very detailed. At this stage, I'm adding ultramarine blue for shadows, so you can already see that I built the shadow values with the skin tone, and then layering over the ultramarine blue just makes them really lovely and deep, and just adds a kind of subtle strength to those shadows. It's still very soft, but you can definitely tell where the depth of the painting is coming from once it's added. It just adds another dimension to the painting, I find. And then sometimes I can't wait to add details in. I need to know if the face is working. So adding in some of the black around the eyes and filling in the eyebrows really, really helps. Now this is the part that I was talking about. It's so tiny. This butterfly is about 1 centimeter big. And yeah, I was using my tiniest brush. It's from the Pro Art miniature painting series. And I think they make them for like model painting, but they work so well for watercolor, and you can get a really fine point. Some of the gaps between these black lines aren't even a millimeter. That's how scary that was. Like one slip up and that butterfly was kind of ruined. There was no real saving it, and I'd already painted much of the subject, which I was not prepared to start again on. Then there was something just a bit wrong. Like you can see quite a lot of his eye poking through those fingers on the right hand side where I'm painting, and I didn't want to leave it just one solid colour. I know I probably could have done, but you know when you look at a painting and you're like, something's not quite right, but you just look at it for a split second and it just feels a bit incomplete and you can't really tell why. Well, that was one of the moments that I identified was just not going to work. It ended up very, very dark in there, but you can still see, when I do the close-up at the end of the video, you can still see where his eyelid is, where the pupil of his eye. There are some different values in there as well to just create a bit of depth in between there, and it stops the eye from feeling like there's something missing. It's a tiny detail, but quite an important one for like a fully finished piece. And then I always find that with watercolour, it's just a balancing act. You know, the more you paint, the more you realise that certain areas aren't dark enough. And so there's always like little tweaks that I'm doing, and I just kind of go over them again and again and just balance them out and keep adding and trying not to overwork the painting. Line work, I think I've also said before, is probably one of my favourite things to do. I used to do it with a pencil, a Faber-Castell Polychromos, and like it was a red one. It was really a really hard line, and I just kind of grew out of it. I ended up using the same tiny paintbrush I did for the butterfly. I ended up using that for the line work, just using a really saturated mixture of the skin tone. It's just a bit softer, a bit more delicate or elegant, I suppose. It just doesn't look so harsh, and I'm enjoying it a bit more at the moment than the red pencil. And then yeah, just the last couple of tweaks to those darkest parts of the painting that I wanted to get done before filling in the flowers. And these are really just the darkest mixture of paint, just in the creases in the ear, underneath his arm next to the flowers, because there would be quite a high amount of shadow, underneath his hair on his forehead, and this just really finishes him off. It's just that finishing touch. And now it's time for flowers. So flowers I love painting. I've been exploring that this year, just I think for some, I don't know, I mean things are pretty grim in the world right now, so pretty things are making me happy. And I use a mixture of techniques for these. You can see I'm using a wet in wet technique. Well, actually I start with a dragging technique technically, because I'm laying down colour and then I'm using fresh water to blur it on the edges. So it's like a circular dragging technique. And then I go into wet in wet with a high contrast of paint. And this just adds a real rosy kind of blush touch to the roses. I wanted like a fantasy feel to them, like a very Sleeping Beauty aesthetic to the flowers. And I had actually considered doing them a little bit like a tattoo, with blue ink on the line work. But in the end, I just thought they're so detailed that it's probably just going to look like a mush of lines and won't make any visual sense. I could probably have filled in some of the areas that were supposed to be in shadow with a very pale wash of blue ink, but in the end I decided to go for something that looks quite a lot more decorative. And they really are quite small. I'm using that tiny paintbrush again to try and build up some of the shape at the centre of the rose. And normally I do that with washes, so big broad strokes, but these are so small that I have to do them almost like lines, which I completely avoid when I'm painting flowers in a big format. And then my favourite part, I know I talked about adding shadows today a fair amount, but it is kind of the focus of this piece. My favourite part is adding shadows to the flowers themselves, especially when they're pink and white, because I use Payne's Grey, which has a slight blue tint to it, and it just contrasts so nicely against the alizarin crimson that I used for the flowers and the white areas. So the white edges of the outside petals start to stand out a bit more, and the inside of the flower starts to look more vibrant. And then I was going to do like this really decorative crown, but the painting was already very highly detailed, so I decided that a simpler shape would look most effective, and so it ended up a solid black. I think sometimes you got to know where you want to pull the eye, and I wanted to pull the viewer's eye to the guy's face, and also to notice the flowers and the butterfly. And I think already, like I said, there was quite a lot of detail in there that making everything kind of the focus would just pull focus, and that's quite an important thing to recognize. Where do you want the viewer's eye to go? And I wanted it to go to the face. So black solid line to pull focus, notice the face, and the eye's not getting confused by all of that detail. Anyway, that's it from me this week, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm really grateful for you watching. I can't express that enough. It really motivates me to keep making more. For the last couple of months, I've only been making like one video a month, and it's not really satisfying me. I really love this platform, and so I'm going to try and make some more. So I don't know how frequent at the moment. I'm going to do a couple of tests and see how it fits into my work-life schedule, because I got a full-time job as well. So I'm going to see how much I can manage without burning myself out. Anyway, I've talked plenty for today, so I'm going to go and let you catch up on some other artist videos, and I will see you next time. Thanks again for watching.